Hi there, my name's Laura Kellen May, and welcome to StreamHorseTV Stable Social Live, where we spark engaging conversation for all horse people, no matter what area of the equine world you're in. Before we get to our featured guest, Elizabeth Letts, yay! I'd like to share with you a bit about Stable Social Live. We will gather together weekly, joined by special guests from all across the equine space, including riders, trainers, horse care experts, authors, artists, and notable horse world personalities. And we have a special segment about retired racehorses starting their second careers. We'd like for you to get involved and be part of the conversation, so please put any questions or comments in the chat area. We'd love to hear from you. One final thing before we head off to our guest. If you know somebody who should be watching this or someone who you think may like to be watching this, please share it. We'd appreciate it. So I'd like to bring on stage our special featured guest, Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hi, Laura. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I want to do a little bit of a bio of you. Elizabeth Letts is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of The $80 Champion and The Perfect Horse, and now her new book has just launched. It's called The Ride of Her Life: The True Story of a Woman, Her Horse, and Their Last Chance Journey Across America. Welcome again. Thank you for being here.
Well, I am so happy to be here. We're going to have so much fun chatting today.
I think we are, and I think we might go over time.
We'll try not to.
Yeah. Where are you coming in from today?
I'm in sunny Southern California, Los Angeles.
Oh, I've always wanted to go to the Hollywood sign. It's on my bucket list. I want to head up there. You
absolutely need to go to the Hollywood sign. It's kind of anticlimactic when you actually climb up there and see it up close. But I live across the basin from it, and on clear days I can actually see it from my house a little bit, tiny.
Excellent. Thank you for bursting my bubble, I guess. You always see it in the movies, right? That's a place to go.
I think that moment when you're driving down the freeway and you look up and you see it there is always very iconic. You think,
yes.
That's LA.
Yeah. So let's go to our weekly warm-up. And I'd like to remind people that you're welcome to join in the conversation. Now, Elizabeth, you are in a unique position to give us a riding warm-up or a writing warm-up. Could you give us a riding warm-up or a writing warm-up?
Well, I think I could give you either. But since I'm really here in my capacity as a writer, why don't we start with a writing warm-up? And I think, the hardest thing about writing is getting started. So what I do is I actually use a technique that's really simple, especially when I'm starting on a new project. And I really recommend this for any of you who are maybe aspiring writers or just dying to get stories about your own horses down. Is what I do is I actually tell myself that I have to hit a certain minimum number of words. And if you don't know how to do that, you just go open up a Word document and you're going to, you can go into tools and it'll tell you what your word count is. Anybody who's ever tried to write 500 words for school knows how to do that. And then I want you to start small. Okay. So when I'm really feeling stuck, I will say to myself, 100 words. And I actually give you permission to even say 50 words. It's not very much, but there's something very freeing, and it doesn't matter what you write. It doesn't have to be the best thing, but you're going to open the document. And when you hit that 50 words or 100 words, if you're ambitious, you're going to stop. And then very often what happens is you're like, oh, I got more to say. And you keep going. But some days you're just like, oh, no, that's enough. But that to me is the very best warm up because it's the discipline. And it's the idea that you're going to sit down, you're going to put some words on paper, whether you feel inspired or not, whether you have anything to say or not. You can always come up with 50 words.
50 words to start. And it's just get started.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. I love that. I think when you're writing, I mean, I don't do a lot of writing, some blog posts and that type of thing, but when you see that blank page in front of you, it's intimidating.
Yes. My favorite adage for all writers is it's easier to edit a bad page than a blank page. So
Oh.
every day I give myself permission to write bad pages if necessary,
Oh.
because when I haven't written anything, I have nothing to work with. And most people, what they're held back is they've got it. Most of us aren't short of ideas, especially if you really have something special you want to write about, especially if it's something about your riding or your horses and you want to say it. But then it's when it's down on the paper, you kind of look at it, that first sentence, and you think, oh, this is no good. It's like looking at yourself in the mirror, honestly. When you get dressed and you're all like thinking you look good, and then you look in the mirror and you're like, I look fat.
Like frumpy.
It's the same thing when you're writing words. You have to resist that impulse to think your words don't look good. And you do that by really promising yourself that you won't force yourself more but you're allowed to. You're allowed to if you get flowing.
Thank you so much. That's great information. Great tips. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'd like to remind people that you're invited to follow StreamHorseTV on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, and go to StreamHorseTV to subscribe for free and discover what we have going on in our community of horse enthusiasts right there. Thank you. Okay, let's go into hearing a little bit more about you. Okay, how did you originally get into horses?
Pony Club.
Oh,
I mean,
yay.
Yeah, we have that in common. So I started riding. I tagged along with my mother, who actually took up horseback riding as an adult, and she would take me to the barn. And the next thing you know, I'd be sitting on the horse, and that's how I got started. And then when I was about, I think 9 or 10, my parents moved to a house where we could keep our horses at home. It really wasn't a farm. I grew up in Southern California, so you don't have a farm. It was kind of like a mini ranchette, I guess you would say. But it was big enough for us to keep our horses at home. So that's at that point we started, collecting. I was in Pony Club. I went into the hunter jumper world, and I competed in hunter jumper for quite a while, and then I switched over to eventing eventually.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Now, we do have a comment here about your warm-up. Would you like to hear what the comment is about the warm-up? It's from Pierce the Heart Lessons. Thank you very much, Pierce the Heart. Love that warm-up, Elizabeth. Just get started.
That's
so
great.
Very
so
easy
true.
to do.
It's fear that holds us back most of the time, really, or fear that we're not going to be good enough. And if you can just force yourself to set that aside for a few minutes, it'll really help you. And, as an adult rewriter, I can tell you that it's fear that holds adult rewriters back also, so it's the same thing. We're afraid when we try something that we think maybe it'll make us look stupid or awkward. And the best way to do it is just to push through that.
So we have some pictures here of you riding. This is how you got started. You mentioned Pony Club. There must be some Pony Club pictures in here.
Let me see what we've got there. So we have, I think, let's see, up at the top, right in the middle, that's me. Yeah, that was me winning my first blue ribbon. That's my horse, Jack. He was a thoroughbred, but he had been on the track, but he was older at the time that we got him. He was about 12 or 13, an absolute gentleman. And his show name was Let's Go. My name, Elizabeth Letts. I always thought that was super cool.
Oh, yes.
But that was my first blue ribbon. I don't know what class we were in or anything like that, but luckily we got a picture of it. And then let's see what else we have.
This looks like a pony. This says USPC Championship.
Yes, I think that was the Championships West, which was in Woodside, California, I think. And that would have been in probably the early 80s. And that's my horse, Conrad.
Cute. Yeah, so you've got a whole history. Now, I'd like to know the story behind this lovely photo here.
That's a Pony Club story. That's my pony, Fuzzy Wuzzy. And he was a pony. So I'm sure, Laura, you may be able to relate to this. I'm sure some of our viewers will be able to relate to this. So when I was growing up in Pony Club, my mom was very dedicated. She took over the Pony Club as the DC, which is like the head of the Pony Club. And she was always around, but our backyard, before they really had this concept of rescuing horses, my mom just believed that horses deserved a home. And so we would collect horses into our home stable and then keep them. And then eventually they would sort of be passed around, and maybe there would be another pony clubber who could ride them, or we would do that. And so Fuzzy was one of those. And he came to us.
He looks like maybe you outgrew him.
Oh, you think? I was 13 that year.
Oh, so yeah, goodness.
So Fuzzy came to us, and it's such a funny story because I still remember it. He belonged to the brother of somebody who else was in the pony club, and he was a really great little pony. And I started riding him, but see, you can see here, look at him. I was competing that day in pony jumpers, and I would have to kick my feet up, to get them out of the way. And then I couldn't ride him anymore because that was the year that I had my growth spurt, and I went from being 4'10" to 5'8" in about 6 months. So that was the story of Fuzzy. And then we managed to then pass him. He went along to another pony clubber and had a really nice life. And then eventually came back to us again and lived out his life with us.
Now, Elizabeth, why would you include this photo here in your About Elizabeth Letts, this final bottom right photo?
Well, there you go, dear. I mean, I have pictures of myself competing admirably up above, and you have zeroed in on that one. But there is a single word for that, and that is humility.
Yes,
it's humility. Sure. Because as a writer, as a rider, as a human being, you need to remember not just your finest moments, but your mistakes. And I can tell you the story behind this photo specifically. This is my little mare, Kim, who I competed on very successfully. We won a lot of classes together. I also pony clubbed on her. She was one of those. I also won barrel races on her. She could do everything. But we used to do this Gambler's Choice event, which I'm sure you remember, with the different points, and you had to go through it very quickly. And I was very good at it. Kim and I were always winning. And you can see, though, in this picture, if you really to go in close, I rode her in a snaffle. Just a regular egg butt snaffle. And for some reason, my trainer at the time decided that I was going to get even tighter turns. This must have been the championship class. And we put her in a bit that was more severe than I was used to, and also more severe than she needed. And I was a kid. I didn't say let's not do this. I guess I thought it was okay. Well, here you have the result. That was the result. I fell off. And that,
I noticed there's lots of people in the crowd as well.
Yeah, there were. And so that picture really reminds me of that. Be humble and really think about what you're doing, and also always proceed with kindness and gentleness. So yes, embarrassing, I don't know. I mean, it's the totality of the experience that we do fall off sometimes. It's really just whether we get back on or not, and whether we learn what happened.
Yes. So thank you so much for sharing all those wonderful stories. Good and not so good, maybe. But how did you become an author?
It started when I was a little girl, and I always loved reading. I think behind every author, what you find is a reader. And I was a child. I dreamed that when I grew up, I was going to be a horse trainer, and then I also wanted to be a writer. And I was particularly inspired by Marguerite Henry, who wrote Misty of Chincoteague, and she wrote King of the Wind and Bridie of the Grand Canyon, and so many other great stories. And I wanted to grow up and write books about famous horses like she did. And I thought, I remember very distinctly, maybe I was 10 years old, thinking, what am I going to do? Because she's going to grab all the good horse stories before I grow up. Didn't, and unfortunately, I did not get to be a horse trainer. That was not in my future, but I did get to actually write books about horses.
Yeah, you sure did. Thank you. So that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And now let's get a little bit now towards your new book, The Ride of Her Life. What an extraordinary woman. How did you find out about her?
Yes. So this is the story of a woman who was 63 years old, And she hit a really hard patch in her life in every way. So she was very sick and was put into the hospital. This was in the year 1954. Went into the hospital, and while she was in the hospital, basically lost all her money on uh, medical bills. When she got out, she was a farmer. She was alone. She had nobody else in her family, and she had no more capital to run this farm. And she was alone, and she was 63 years old. And the doctor had given her 2 to 4 years to live. So she basically was in a hopeless situation. She had no family to rely on. And the doctor said, I can give you a spot in the charity home. You can go get your rocker and sit on the front porch, and we'll support you through charity. And she was a very independent, Yankee farmer, never dependent on anyone. She had worked every day in her life. She just felt like she couldn't do it. She also felt like she really wasn't ready to be put up on the shelf yet. She thought she still had something in her. So she decided that she'd always dreamed of seeing the Pacific Ocean. But she had no car. She had no money for bus fare. I didn't even really drive. I didn't know anything about airplanes. So she thought to herself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take my horse. I'm going to take my dog, and I'm going to find a horse on my budget, which was she only had, about $25 at the time. And I'm going to see if I can ride a horse all the way to California. And so this is her story.
Now, I thank you so much that's a great synopsis about that. And I want to just kind of follow along that thread about buying a horse for $25. Is that what you said?
She only had about $60 to her name. She wouldn't ever really admit exactly how many of those dollars she parted with, but I believe it was most of them. But yes, I wrote about an $80 champion. This was a less than $80 champion.
Yes. Okay. So I wanted to follow, thank you, but I wanted to follow up along that thread, because when I was reading the section in the book about the scene where she goes into the horse trader, and we all know about horse traders and horse dealers, and it really reminded me of when my mom and I went to look at our first horse, who was tied up in a standing stall at the front of somebody's garage. And when I was reading it, it kind of stopped me in my tracks, because the way Tarzan, the horse in your book, it turned his head around and nickered at her when she gave him the carrot or the treat. It was like the way my mom gave the carrot to this horse. His name was Lightning. He was one of those PMU, the pregnant Mary Ewing colts. And when he tried to turn around his head to say thank you, I guess he just kind of nickered. I knew then, as a 10-year-old kid, we got ourselves a horse.
Isn't that just, and how many of us share that experience, the one that Annie had, where you just somehow, there's this meeting of the minds that happens. And, we go and we look at this horse and we look at that horse, but sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes there's just this, in humans, we call it love at first sight, but the animal seems to recognize you, you seem to recognize the animal, and magic happens. And we all dream of having that happen to us, at least once in our life. But thank you so much, because your story was just giving me chills. I just love the story, and I could just imagine it. And the fact that this was a horse that really needed a second chance, is even more meaningful.
Yes. Yeah. He was a great horse, actually. They were great pals, my mom and him. His name was Lightning. Good old Bean. That. Yes. There's also another thing in there that reminded me of my mom when Annie said he wasn't a plug. He wasn't an old plug. That Annie said that about Tarzan. He was full of life. He was an old plug. And my mom would call horses old plugs, and I've never heard anybody else say that. So I love that.
Yeah, that's that old, language where they had such a rich vocabulary for animals. I think it's really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think about that a lot. And some of them, we just don't use them anymore. But the number of words in the English language to describe different kinds of horses, different parts of the horse, different colors. It's so rich. And I love to keep those words alive because that's such a reflection of our history. We have, it's like they say I don't know what it is. Some language has 100 words for snow. It's like Alaskan. And the English language has thousands and thousands of very specific words to describe horses, like a plug. And we all know what that is,
An old plug. He's just an old plug.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, you just had one of your virtual launches, and you were speaking with the one and only Denny Emerson. How was that conversation?
Oh, what a personal thrill for me. Denny Emerson of Tamarack Hill Farm, he is not only, of course, an incredible equestrian with, gold medals in eventing and also a Tevis Cup endurance buckle. But he's also one of our foremost kind of historians and philosophers of horses. He is an absolute font of information. He's a fascinating person. And I do have a personal story about Denny. I actually met him for the first time during this event. But when I was in college, I was entering my senior year in college, and I had gotten a new horse, actually the one that I rode at the Pony Club Championships. And he was a great horse. And I thought, I kind of got a shot here. And my mother and her best friend came to visit me in New Haven and told me maybe I should drop out of college because they thought they could get me in for as a working student to work for Denny. And I had this real moment of like, which way do I want my life to go? And I decided to stay in school, which who knows? But anyway, that was sort of my personal connection to him. But talking to him was absolutely fascinating. We had an incredible conversation.
Now, just to follow up on that, what did you take at college?
I majored in history.
Beautiful.
Who
that's
knew
wonderful.
Who knew that's what I would end up doing with my life? But yes, that's what I did.
So we have a clip of part of your conversation with Denny, and it was about Annie growing up in the world with horses, and that she may have been less in formal training with the horses, but she was comfortable with them. And I want to play that clip, if that's okay. Is that okay? Okay, yes. I'm going to play the clip.
That she grew up with.
Okay, I'm just going to start that over again.
Everybody that she grew up with had horses as transportation, farm labor, military, basically that, so she grew up in a world where horses were used by everybody. If you wanted to go to town, you hitched up a horse and you drove to town. If you wanted to hay your fields, you hitched up the mower, hitched up a team of horses, and you went out and mowed the field. Everybody 50 years old or older had been born in the 1900s. And so there was still, when I was a kid, there was still very much a prevailing ethic that horses were to use. We didn't have, quote, relationships with our horses in those days. You never heard the word dressage. You didn't hear about putting a horse on the aids or all the stuff that we take for granted today simply didn't exist. Or if it existed, it didn't exist in rural Cowtown, Greenfield, Massachusetts in 1950. And people had learned, even if she grew up on a farm, she'd learned a lot of this stuff simply by osmosis. Mm-hmm. I mean, her parents would have had work horses. Her neighbors would have had driving horses. Horses were the way you got around. It was simply just part of the woodwork. You didn't think about it. It wasn't an unnatural thing. It was just, it's the way now you go out and get in your car.
That must have been a really special conversation to have with him.
Well, it was so fascinating. Denny showed up with his diary, where he had actually kept a daily diary during the time that Annie was doing her ride, where he would say things like, waited for the blacksmith, and what he fed his horses. And he was talking about how he would get on and ride his horse. He had decided to prepare for a 100-mile endurance ride. And he would just get on his horse and he would ride 17 miles away to the town of Whately, Massachusetts. It's funny because he grew up in a town that was very near where I went to boarding school. So I was very familiar with the region that he was talking about, where now it would be almost impossible to do that. And one of the things that I think is so fascinating about the ride of her life, and why I think that horse people will really be drawn into this story is it's just what Denny was saying. We had a different relationship back then. People had more practical, just hours being around horses, seeing horses handled, and learning things organically like that. And it's very hard for modern people to really reproduce that. We, many of us board our horses now, and just the number of hours that you spend is going to be limited in comparison. At the same time, though, I think it's also important what Denny said is he said, it was a different relationship, but it was also what we know about horses, what we're able to, the kinds of insights that we're able to draw on now in terms of understanding horses' psychology and what it is, how it is that we can manage them and communicate with them more effectively. And so you see a contrast, and I think it's very nice to kind of look back and say, look at this world. That's what the world was at the time. And this is where we are now and how did we get here? So it's really kind of an interesting, our relationship to our animals has changed. And I think we have lost some things by not being so deeply entwined with them, but I think we've gained some things by working harder to understand them.
It's so interesting. Thank you so much it's very interesting. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. But let's get back to your research. How did you do the research for the story about Annie and your book, The Ride of Her Life?
Yes. Well, with any book, I start out, I find out that the story exists and I find out what materials are available. The challenge, and this is for anybody who's watching this right now, who's interested in not just horses, but also writing, it's for a story to be big enough to hold an entire 300-page book. The story has to have enough meat to it. So I find out, okay, there's this interesting woman. She rode her horse across the country in 1954, but I need to know if there's enough material for me to draw on to be able to rebuild the story. In her case, there was a previous book that was written. It was her memoirs that were co-written with another woman who had taken an interest in her story back at the time. So I was able to draw on that as a resource. And then I really delved into newspapers and contemporary accounts of people who had met her. And then I was also able to find people who remembered her during this cross-country ride across the country in 1954. Most of them would be people who were children, but I did manage to find people who had met Annie in person, that she had come to stay at their house. So it was a long journey. I also spent a lot of time driving around, retracing her route.
So I was going to ask you that. Did you retrace her route? You drove her route as best you could?
I did. I didn't do it all in one piece because of time limitations. So I did pieces. And what I found was it was because the main thing that really you see in this book is that the 1954 to 1966 was just prior to the United States being absolutely changed fundamentally by the highway interstate system, which was signed into law by Eisenhower in 1956. So in 1954, our country was still kind of a country of small towns and connected by less major roads. And we just didn't have all these big highways, which made it easier for her to do the ride. But it was sort of hard to figure out her route because she would say she went from this place to that place. And I'd be trying to, trace it on Google Maps, and Google Maps, would immediately direct me to I-95 or something, which is not the way she went. So I'll show you because I have some here. Vintage gas station maps. I went on eBay and I found maps that were written at the time that she was riding. And I, I drove around the country with these old guys. It was a lot of U-turns.
What year is that map?
50. They were all 50. All of them. I don't know if this one, I don't remember specifically. They were all 54, 55, 56. Because if you went any later, all of a sudden, there are major interstate highways. There were some highways then, interstate highways, but not really. I mean, really, people kind of went from town to town, and it would take a long time to get there. And so it's really a kind of a little slice of life of how things were. And as one of the things that Denny was talking about was just how much easier it was. Of course, he's an veteran endurance rider, and he remembers a time when in order to condition your horse, you could just go, not because you lived in Montana, but right there in Massachusetts, right there in the suburbs of, the big cities. There was plenty of room, and people would let horsemen cross their properties
Cross
very
their
easily
property,
without
yeah.
worrying about, liability and all that kind of thing. So it's definitely very different.
Well, thank you so much. That's really interesting. I love that you brought that map to show us. It's always so much fun to see that. Now,
Yeah.
before we go on, we're going to go on. I'd like to know if you could share with us where people can find your book, The Ride of Her Life.
Sure. So it's you should be able to find it in pretty much any bookstore. And it's available. You can purchase it online or in a physical store. It's available in all formats. So you can get it in a digital edition, audiobook, regular book, and also even large print if your eyes get tired when you read. And if you want more information about me or about different links to get to the books, other appearances that I'm doing, you can go to my website, www.elizabethletts.com, my name. Also,
Okay.
you can also sign up there for my newsletter if you want to just kind of keep up with me and find out. I will share giveaways sometimes, and also I share sometimes behind the book information.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's wonderful news. And it's elizabethletts.com. Perfect. Thank you so much. Now that's excellent. Before we go to our next segment, we'd like for you to stay around, but we do have some comments here, and I'm going to read the comments. This is Pierce the Heart. Thank you so much, Pierce the Heart, for that. Randy says, good evening, ladies. I agree. Sometimes we just believe it will work and we push through. Thank you, Randy, very much. Appreciate it. StreamHorseTV, The Ride of Her Life, and that's me. Okay, so this is also from StreamHorseTV. The Ride of Her Life is available now at your favorite bookseller. Check out elizabethletts.com. Thank you so much for all the comments, and we appreciate your comments. If you'd like to put a comment in the comment area, whatever, I'm not sure what you call it. Is it comment area, chat area? Please do. We'd love to hear from you. So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing the story about Annie with all of us. Appreciate it. And we'd like for you to stay around so that we can talk about your off-the-track thoroughbred. Are you ready for that? We have a picture of you on your thoroughbred.
Yes.
And this is Norman.
Yes, this is Norman. I bought him. My parents bought him for me. He was my move-up horse. He was dead green and a very good jumper. And I think I was 12 years old at the time. The interesting story about Norman is, you think about the thoroughbreds being full of energy and hot temperament. And when we bought him, we thought he was quiet. Well, it turned out it very quickly became clear that he didn't have very good endurance. He was a great jumper, but he was hard to bring into condition. And it turned out that he had a very unusual cardiac defect, which made him at the time unsuitable for a competitive horse. But we donated him to the vet school at UC Davis, who diagnosed the cardiac defect, and they were able to repair it with a surgery that at the time was very experimental. And they fixed his heart. It had to do with the malformation of the great vessels. And he went on to have a competitive career, not with me. It was a little bit of a heartbreak for me because my parents really couldn't afford to buy me another horse. And I went horseless for a couple of years after that. But it was really heartening to me because I used to run into Norman sometimes later after he had recovered, and he was doing very well.
Did you call him Norman in the horse show?
That's so weird. I'm actually blanking on what his name was. His barn name was Norman, and his show name is not coming to me. It's going to come to me after we get off.
Yep, but 3 a.m. used to be, I got to send Laura an email and tell her what the name of my horse was. Yes, so we're going to move on to our next section here, and this is the Retraining Goal segment, where each month we spotlight a retired racehorse in their second career. And this is the Retired Racehorse Project, and this segment is sponsored by the Retired Racehorse Project. Thank you so much. And we have a special guest. We're going to introduce you to Caitlin, and we're going to bring Caitlin on here. Hi, Caitlin. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Where are you right now?
I am in Lexington, Kentucky, from a hotel room, about 10 minutes from the horse park.
Oh, you're at a horse show.
Yes. Yep. I brought my baby thoroughbred. He has impressed us so much the past few months that we brought him to the Split Rock Jumping Tour Hunter Jumper Classic.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to see him. And I want to tell people who are listening, who are watching, we would like to see all of your off the track thoroughbreds and retired racehorses of all breeds. So tag us on Instagram and Facebook with the @StreamHorseTV and use the hashtag StreamHorseTV to be featured on our program right here. So I've got some pictures of you, Caitlin.
Yes,
Good, bad.
I was listening to Elizabeth and her, like, seeing her photos, and some of it sounds very familiar, except for the jumping part of things. I did not start jumping until I was in my 20s.
Wow, good for you.
I had the ponies and my first horse. My dad actually traded a boat for.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, let's see
Your
the
first horse you traded a boat for. That's awesome. That's a great story.
Yeah.
So we've got this here. So I wanted to add this. There's this. This week we welcome Caitlin and her new baby, Checkered, 2017 Bay Thoroughbred Gelding. I love the advertisement of him. It was said, gelding check, chrome check, big check, teddy bear check. It checked off all the boxes. And take a look at this. How is that for horse flesh? So how did you come across this horse?
Well, I do social media marketing for, I'm the COO now of Grand Slam Social, which is a social media marketing agency that we specialize in the equestrian and horse racing industry specifically. So some of our clients include like Breeders' Cup. We've worked with Keeneland. We work with Woodford Thoroughbreds, My Racehorse. So I've been in the thoroughbred. I was also marketing director at Windstar Farm back in 2014, 2015. Around then. So I've been in the thoroughbred racing industry for a while, and I had decided that when I was finally able to financially afford, and it made sense to get my first horse as an adult, that I wanted it to be an off the track thoroughbred because of the value you can get, in that you can get a beautiful horse with a great temperament. You know, I grew up in Texas and not anywhere near the racetrack. And so I certainly believed in the, I guess, the stigma that surrounds ex-racehorses or thoroughbreds in general, just that they're extremely hot and difficult to handle. But I knew from working in the industry and being around horses, being in the barns, being on the backside, hanging out with the stallions at Windstar Farm, that was not the case. Every horse is unique. Every horse has their own personality. You just have to find that right horse. So when the opportunity arose and I finally had a place to keep a horse and I felt comfortable financially, I knew that I wanted to go through New Vocations here. They're based here in Lexington. And I started looking. I put in my application. And I was just kind of determined to find the right one.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now you totally covered all the bases for everything. Now this guy, he's really handsome, and but I do want to ask you how you got your start in horses, because I've got some photos of you when you were younger. You grew up in You grew up in Texas, loving horses, but in a non-horse family, and you started on the 4-H.
Kind of
started on the 4-H circuit.
Mm-hmm. I grew up in South Texas, and this was my heart horse. This was not the horse that my dad had traded a boat for. We paid $1,500 for him. And at the time, I thought this horse, that was super expensive. We bought him as a barrel horse, as you can see. Well, it turns out he was purebred Arabian. So we ended up qualifying and competing at Arabian Youth Nationals in showmanship, which is the picture on the far left. And it's funny because Charles has some similarities.
I was going to ask you that. I said, "Oh, look at this! This is a bay with similar markings." Did your barrel horse? Did he have socks too?
Yes, his name was Hoodal. He had white. Yeah, he had a little white in the front and back, not quite as much chrome as Charles has, but yes, he was wonderful. So that was after, I was born into a completely non-horsey family. But I think like one of my first words was probably horse. And I was just determined to do anything to be near them. So when I was about 8 years old, I went and found a job at a place called Ponyland, which was a local kind of like petting zoo pony ride place. And I worked there every single weekend for 2 years. And my dad finally said, okay, I guess this horse thing is like not going away.
Yeah, she's not going to grow out of it.
So when he happened to have a friend who had a horse in a pasture, he was like a 5-year-old Appaloosa. And the friend said, well, I'll take your boat. The boat didn't even work. and we got the horse and the trailer and the saddle, and that was the start of it.
It's a pretty good deal.
Awesome. So this is the New Vocations video.
Mm-hmm.
And this is his registered name is Checkered, and you call him Charles.
Yes, I call him Charles because I was in Charlestown, West Virginia, when I put the deposit down on him. I was with a dear friend and my co-founder, one of them of Grand Slam Social, Molly McGill, and I was in between two horses really, and I showed her this, and she said, "You have to get this horse. You have to buy this horse.
He's got a lot of presence, this horse, doesn't he?"
He does, yes. He is a sweetheart. He is an absolute sweetheart, but he, as my boyfriend likes to say, has a very high opinion of himself.
Oh.
It just wasn't, he just was not meant to be a racehorse. He did not find that very amusing. He raced once on the turf at Lone Star Park, and he won $100. He cost $65,000 at the Keeneland September sale. Originally, he was actually hip 1321, which, if you know much about the Keeneland September sale, they go from 1 to 5,000 usually. So he was pretty high up in the sale. So they thought he was going to run, but that did not suit him.
Well, it's tough to know what you're going to get. And he looks like a great guy for sure. And what was Charles or Checkered, what was he like when you first got him? I've got a video of you here, one of your first rides, if not, or maybe your first ride.
Yeah, I think this was the first time I ever sat on him. And
what was going through your mind?
I was
Were you breathing?
Happy. Yes, I was happy. I was relieved. Honestly, I was a little bit in shock. Because I just felt he had been, I believe this was actually on October 31st, because I was getting ready to leave for Breeders' Cup in Lexington for a week. And I was like, I want to ride. I want to have a first ride. I got him on September 11th of last year. So he'd been there for quite a while before I ever sat on him. And I just remember thinking, this feels very natural.
He looks like he's ready to go on their saddle.
Yes.
Awesome.
He has been on the buckle from the beginning.
Excellent.
Yes. So
Elizabeth, does this bring back any memories for you?
Absolutely.
I'm just admiring. I mean, he's such a beauty, but I just love how relaxed he looks. You absolutely look like there's that connection there. And to think that that's your first ride, I love it.
Yes. It's great.
Yes. Like I said, I was a bit in awe. I was trying not to let my emotions like overwhelm me, obviously, while I was on the horse, but I was thinking, and it makes me emotional, or makes me emotional a bit to see that now, because of all of the ups and downs that we've been through since then. But going back to that initial thinking, this is something special.
So you're saying ups and downs. So what was so great about it, and what was the down part of it?
It sounds pretty crazy now. I bought the horse sight unseen, but I trusted New Vocations, racehorse adoption program, and I knew he had really good connections. I mean, he was bred and raised by Claiborne Farm, right here in Kentucky, and I bought him off of those photos that you saw and that video. I bought him for the purpose of retraining him to be a hunter. That's what I enjoy doing now in my later or my earlier adult amateur years. So I bought him off that video. I had never seen him free jump. So for the first couple of months, we didn't ride. He just got settled in. And then our assistant trainer started working with him. He would not lunge. He can be very headstrong when he wants to. So he would not lunge. It took 2 people to get him to lunge. And then he went through, just some your normal training things. He would kick out at the leg, and that's still kind of one of his go-to moves when he gets upset. But there were there was a period of time, really up until 2 months ago, that I didn't even know if he could jump. As I said, I never saw him free jump or even under saddle before he showed up in my front yard.
Here's a video of you with him now, Caitlin. Well, I shouldn't say now. Here is something in May. It looks like it's May.
Pretty recent.
And my goodness, he has really progressed. He looks like he's just taking it all in stride. No pun intended there. He's just taking it all, right?
This was our first time doing anything other than cross rails. And this was actually a huge moment as well, because a couple of weeks before, he went to his first horse show at the Great Southwest Equestrian Center in Katy, Texas, and was phenomenal. He just blew me away at the show. He jumped the 2-foot with my trainer, and I was just so in love. And then we came home, and he got a day off, and he got a day or 2 off. And then we came back and started riding again, and he was not having any of it. He was back to, stopping, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know. But
what have I done?
What have I done? Yes. But I suggested, I've always had him on stomach medicines, but I was
going to say, it sounded kind of like ulcer stuff to me.
Yeah. I said, let's do the omeprazole. Let's just go for it. And so that has really helped. And then a bit of it is he thinks he's something special, and he doesn't, it's funny because everybody says, get a thoroughbred, because they want to please people, and they want to, be so great for you. And he's a little entitled. My initials are KC, and his initials are KC. It's on all of our tack and saddle pads, and that stands for King Charles. Because he kind of thinks that we're here to serve him sometimes.
Okay, so is this the horse show you were talking about?
This is my trainer, Adrian Gamboa Ford, and that is his first time ever in the ring.
I mean, he's taking it all like a pro.
He has natural lead changes. I mean, and we were watching this and we were just laughing at how
often he changes his leads?
Yes, how
on
often
the straight line to the jumps.
Down the diagonal, he gets excited. But hey, I would rather have those easy lead changes at this point than no lead changes or sticky lead changes. And we were also laughing at how he jumps everything. I mean, these are 2 feet and he's jumping at like they're at least 2.3, 2.6. And it's so funny because when we started jumping and we were doing cross rails, I mean, he was just not impressed.
No.
So
he likes those flowers, I guess.
Yes. He would just go right through the cross rails.
Some of them just need a little more height to actually pay attention, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the flowers too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there's got his tongue out. Oh, and then now my internet. Okay. That is so much fun.
Yes.
He's really a beauty. Very much so. Can I ask a question? I'm wondering, what was it like? So you bought him sight unseen. I want to hear the moment of the meeting.
Oh my goodness. I was so, it was really nice in this day of social media and everything being documented. I have video of him arriving, but I was on my own. Pretty much everybody had gone home from the barn. His schedule his transportation schedule had been a little messed up. Originally, he was supposed to come early in the morning, came late at night. And my boyfriend was in Massachusetts and my family was not there. So it was just me and him and one of the barn dogs. And the guy walked him off the trailer and he was a little shaggy for my taste. You know, he just had his mane was a little bleached and just minor, you know, he had front shoes, but he didn't have back shoes. And he was, you know, just kind of like, hey, and he was just the sweetest. He was just so sweet. My mom actually came the next day and met him. And my mother, who is actually afraid of horses and does not love the idea of me riding and especially jumping, fell in love with him. And
awesome.
And he's just a sweetheart. And I will go, especially, you know, in the early days when I wasn't riding, I would do a little bit of showmanship work with him. So he knows how to square up. He knows how to back up. He knows how to pivot. And I would do those things with him. And then I would also just go and sit in his stall.
Yeah. Get to know him. I think I think a lot of people don't have the time or the opportunity to do that. They come out for their once a week lesson and that's their horse time is an hour or something like that. And they don't have the opportunity, unfortunately. And I think you learn a lot from your horse, like you say, sitting in the stall with it, with them. I know I had a student who said that her horse was paying an attention to her. So that's what I asked her to do. I said, well, get your chair and don't sit in the stall with him because it's not safe, but you know, put your chair outside the stall door and put the guard across and just hang out.
Yeah, just be there with them. And
I know if my pony, when I was growing up, was ever alive to share the secrets that I shared with her, I don't know. She could write a book.
Well, you know, I think one of the difficult but rewarding parts of this has been, so he showed up. I immediately fell in love. He was a sweetheart. Again, didn't know besides that video what his athletic talents or what he might be like under saddle. And it was really hard actually in the beginning because I had always just assumed. You saw my horse Hoot Owl from my teenage years earlier, who I described as my heart horse. I had done leases up until, you know, short-term or small leases, nothing major. And I'd always just assumed that when I got my own horse, it would be like an immediate connection. And that was I mean, I definitely loved him, but the connection was not immediate, and we still work on it. We still have good days and bad days. And where some days I feel like he would do anything. He trusts me and he wants to please me. And then some days where, he's a 4-year-old gelding
Off
who,
the track thoroughbred.
yeah, he hasn't even been a gelding for a year.
Right.
And,
I just want to say I appreciate so much what you just said, Caitlin, because, in the book or in the movie, there's always that like love at first sight moment, or often there is. But in reality, most of the time you have to get to know people to know what you like and don't like about them. And that communication with horses is like, just because it's a little slow and you are figuring each other out, that doesn't mean that it's not such a great relationship. But that's so honest. I really like that.
yes, and I feel like that's something, that's been a huge learning part of this experience for me, because as I said, I just assumed when I found, like I saw this horse on the internet and I was like, this is the one. And I just, obviously he came off the trailer, had no idea who I was. And we've had to go through the ups and downs, and we still are, but I've seen his potential. And I loved him even before I saw his jumping potential, which I think is phenomenal. And I think that he's going to be a great ambassador for thoroughbreds in the hunter world.
I like what you say that he's going to be a good ambassador for the thoroughbreds, because there is some stigma around that, like you mentioned before. Sometimes they just don't want to even touch it because they get such a bad rap. But it's not. I think it's not the horse. It's oftentimes the way they are trained, right?
Right,
It's
and
what they're doing on the track.
And that was another thing as I said, new vocations, I was very confident in adopting from them. He came from great connections. So I looked for that. But I think, the hard thing, I guess, what makes me kind of just get a little upset when people talk about the crazy off the track stigma is that these horses, any horse can be a dangerous 1,000+ pound
Right.
animal.
Exactly.
And especially a young horse. Or it could be, horses are fiery if they're in good health up until they're in their 20s. So there's never, I don't know why it's, no, I would never like advise, somebody getting a 3-year-old off the track or 5-year-old off the track and starting it without a trainer. I'm so fortunate that my trainer she is like the female horse whisperer. It's amazing. The things that I'm always in awe of her. And when I see her ride and how she problem solves with the horses and on the horses. And so, but I think as long as you take the right precautions and you have the right support system, and that's really what it is too. You need a support system. I've spent many nights crying to my boyfriend, saying this was all a mistake.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that information with us, Caitlin. It's so wonderful to hear you talk about those things. Now, before we go to our last segment, I'd like for you to stick around too, Caitlin, if you can, for the grab bag of questions. But I do have some comments here that I'd like to show and read. This one is from Liz Calloway Gooch. I groomed at Churchill many years ago. Loved the horses. Thank you so much for that comment. Appreciate it. And this one is from Jerry. Thank you, Jerry. For those who've enjoyed the writings about horses, The Perfect Horse and the $80 Horse, they're an opportunity to meet the author. Hope the discussion is available when you might want to check it out. Okay. Thank you so much, Jerry. And Liz also says, do you ride at the horse park? I'm about an hour and a half from there.
Yes. So we made the drive up. It was about a 20-hour trek, but we overnighted halfway through. And we were so impressed with him. It is his first show in May that we thought he needs to make the trip to Kentucky, because when at his first show, I had such another sigh of relief and another light bulb moment with him, kind of like when I first rode him. And I just felt this happiness kind of emanating from him. And it was almost like I was grazing him, and it was like, this is what this horse was born to do.
Thank you for sharing that, Caitlin. Appreciate that. Thank you so much, Randy, for your comment. It was fun listening to all of you tonight. Thank you. Don't go anywhere, Randy. We've got another segment here with a grab bag, but thank you so much for listening in. And now, Caitlin, you are going to a horse show this week.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait for next week, and I want to see and we want to hear all about it. I hope you're going to be able to take some videos and show us what's happening.
Yes, he schooled. He traveled beautifully, I will say, handled the journey beautifully. He schooled for the first time with my trainer today in one of probably the more impressive rings. If anybody's familiar with the horse park, the Kentucky Horse Park, it's the Walnut Ring, and it overlooks the cross country and steeplechase course. And there was a 6-stride going directly at that view. And he had some baby moments schooling for sure. But of course we expected that because he is a baby, and you can just see his mind working, and just, he has the kindest, most intelligent eyes. And so he's showing tomorrow, and thank you.
Yes, good luck. And on that note, let's go skip ahead to the grab bag of questions. Now, I know that. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and good luck at the horse show. I really hope that you do well. I don't know if you're supposed to say break a leg to somebody or not, and we'll see you next Tuesday for sure, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
So Elizabeth and Caitlin, what's the best training trick you've recently learned?
Ooh, for horses?
Well, it says training trick. Do you have a dog trick? Boyfriend trick? I didn't realize that was going to be so tough.
I would actually say this is maybe an all around. Make a great way to convince somebody or something to do something is to make them think it was their idea.
Oh, very good. And I think you need to do that with thoroughbreds too, right?
Yes. It's about empowerment. I never want Charles or anybody that I love or work with to feel not confident, because that usually leads to failures. So yeah, it's all about empowering them to make the right decisions.
That's an excellent training advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is super huge on all levels. And how about you, Elizabeth?
Oh, for me, I think one of the things for training myself as an adult re-rider is that I feel like when I really can't feel like I'm controlling my seat well, the best way is for me to ride without stirrups, and that somehow reconnects me to my younger self.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Riding without stirrups, and good for you for riding without stirrups. I don't know that I would do that. I think because I'm just afraid to now. After all those years in Pony Club, I'm afraid to do that now. But yeah, that's great. So for me, the best training thing that I learned was last week, where there's 6 things your horse has to learn how to do. Go forward, stop, turn left, turn right, back up, and turn around. Keep those 6 things in mind. Excellent. Okay, next one. Do you, Caitlin or Elizabeth, do you have any superstitions when you go riding or at horse shows?
I always have favored the number 6 and 3, and so I'm always hoping I'll have 1 or 2 of them in my number.
Perfect, but you don't get to choose your number, so
No.
Your fingers crossed you get a 6 in there.
Yeah, I mean, I have no control over it, which makes it easier to handle.
How about you, Caitlin?
Well, I'm a perfectionist, and that can be difficult riding horses because there's never, perfection is actually not achievable in most things. But so I have to keep my nerves under control. I really, really have to work at it. And so I'm not superstitious, but and I don't let myself be purposefully, because I will go down a rabbit hole of, oh my goodness, X happened, now Y is going to happen, Z is going to happen. So if anything, what I'm working on is to not be superstitious and to instead use like empowering self-talk and telling myself that I do have control over this and I can affect the outcomes, and that, the goal is to get over all of the fences in the correct order.
That's important. That's
Not
not a superstition, though. I think that's a requirement, right?
But not to be right. But not
That's
to
a
be
good point,
perfect.
though, because it's much more under your control than hoping you'll get the numbers 6 or 3.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So, Caitlin and Elizabeth, if you could take your horse for coffee, what's one question you would ask them? Caitlin, you go first. One question.
I would have to ask if he was enjoying having coffee with me, because
very good question.
yeah,
That's a good question.
I'm fortunate enough to live on the farm where my horse lives. And there's kind of a joke around the barn that I'm a bit of a helicopter bomb. So I don't know if I might smother my horse sometimes. He might not. He might decline that invitation to coffee. I don't know.
And how about you, Elizabeth?
Well, I think I'd say, basically, thank you so much for being patient with me and putting up with me.
That's a good one. Very good. So any last words, Elizabeth and Caitlin, as we wind things up here?
I just want to say thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun, and I definitely enjoyed meeting King Charles. And good luck to you, Caitlin. I think he really looks like he has so much potential.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. Like I said, I truly hope and believe he can be an ambassador for thoroughbreds back in the hunter ring. And it's been such an amazing journey. I've learned, I've grown more, I've developed more resilience riding horses in my 20s than maybe I did as a child. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's wonderful news. Yeah. So thank you for joining me today as well. My name's Laura Kellen May, and thank you for joining us on StreamHorseTV Stable Social Live. Remember to follow StreamHorseTV on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, and subscribe for free at streamhorse.tv for more information on what we have going on in our community of horse enthusiasts. See you next week when our guest will be Kareem Rosser, who will be discussing his experience growing up playing polo in the inner city of Philadelphia, and his book, Crossing the Line, which is being made into a feature film. So thank you so much for being here. And I would also like to thank Natalie Mayrath, who's the producer behind the scenes there, and also Tom Pierce for also producing us tonight. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week. Thanks now. Bye.
Bye.